Hello and welcome back to Suspended Fanimation. I am your host, Dennis Patholkis, and this is Doom Patrol, Season 1, Episode 6, Doom Patrol Patrol. Yeah, that it wasn't a misstatement there. That was Doom Patrol Patrol. That is the name of the of the episode. And holy shitski. There was a lot to pack in on this one. As I was talking about earlier in the chat here, it's a 57-minute long episode that took me over an hour and a half to watch because I had to take notes and everything. This one is jam-packed full of stuff. And you think this is almost kind of like a throwaway episode, but it isn't. It's very relevant to what's going on and everything that has happened so far. And kind of in a really fucked up way too. So before I get started, spoiler alert, I am going to be spoiling the episode. If you haven't watched the episode, go and take a look at it. It's on DC Universe. You can sign up for a free trial, 7-day free trial. Also, you can watch the first episodes of all the DC Universe shows right now for free until March 29th. There you go. So I am going to be spoiling it. Take a look at it. If you haven't taken a look at it, go and take a look at it. Come back. This will be a video, and you can comment down in the comment section. Thank you, Viking Bitch. So, yeah, this is definitely not a throwaway episode. And my God. So we have a little bit of aftermath of the last episode with the creator, the decreator, and the recreator. And Elliot, of course, who was the unwritten book, of course, was decreated by the decreator and hasn't returned. So we see Rita outside on the bench where he had disappeared, mourning him. And she's mourning Elliot, and we have a flashback to her in LA in 1956. And of course, this is after she has received her powers, and her face, she's sitting outside of a office in LA, of course, outside of Bloom Studios, waiting for one Sydney Bloom to see her. And we see her face kind of sag a little bit, and then she's like, nope, but she gets it back into place and everything's good. And an hour and a half later, she gets to go in and take a look. And she wants to be lead in their new picture. She knows Sydney. She's worked with him before, and he basically tells her her name is nowhere. No one, because she's been out of the business for so long at this point. And she says, come on, we both know that the person that you're actually looking at for the lead role is really bad. You need a hit. You need me. And he kind of says, well, what are you willing to do for it, kind of thing, and puts his hand on her knee. And she's like, okay. So she gets up and then sits on his lap. And he starts nibbling on her neck, making out with her and all this stuff. Of course, the casting couch that we've heard before. And then we start hearing some moans, but because we see her starting to ooze a little bit and starting to lose her composure and starting to melt. And then we see outside in the office of the secretary, we hear him kind of moaning, almost like in ecstasy, but we know it's not. We hear something break. And we look inside and we see Rita has turned into this big gelatinous blob, and she's over the top of him. She pulls herself together, and she's asking Sydney, is he okay? Are you okay? Sydney is dead. She basically crushed him or suffocated him to death. And the secretary comes in and knocks on the door, comes in, and she sees him laying there dead. And she looks at him and she goes, well, looks like he finally had a heart attack. The bastard finally had a heart attack. And then she tells, Rita starts to cry, and she puts Rita's shawl on her and says, you were never here, and sends her out. So, yeah. Wow. So kind of interesting. Oh, sorry. God. Again, this setup is just annoying the crap out of me at the moment. And I'm going to have to do something tonight, I believe, and have a different setup by tomorrow at least. So we go back to the present day. And of course, Rita's sitting there on the bench, and Larry comes over and basically kind of consoles her and says he doesn't think Elliot is coming back, unfortunately. So we see Cliff trying to look up his daughter on the internet, and Cliff, being the Luddite that he is, not knowing, what Facehole is, because it's called Facehole, not Facebook, of course. And he finds his daughter, and he says, that profile can't be viewed except by friends. And he goes, "Friends, what the hell? I'm her fucking father." And he smashes the computer. And then we see him bringing crustless sandwiches to Jane's door, because that's the way Baby Doll likes him, of course. And he's going to ask Jane to help him out. And of course, Jane just kind of looks at him, and we know it's not Jane. And she hits the plate of sandwiches on the floor and shuts the door on him, smearing them across the floor. And he goes, "You're still pissed at me? Because I'm not cleaning this up." "Okay, fine, I'm cleaning it up, but just this one time." Yeah, Cliff cannot get his shit together. Yeah, and then we see that Jane is actually looking at her VHS tapes of her sessions with Chief as well, and we see her talking to Baby Doll, and that's when we hear the mention of Doom Patrol. That Doom Patrol, it's the first mention of Doom Patrol from him, and I guess she remembers it, and she's pouting because she thinks that he's gonna go hang out with this group all the time. I'm trying to figure out. So I forget to mention this last episode. So we saw Jane in the 70s looking the same age as she does now in 2019, because it's supposed to be now. Do these people even fucking age? I mean, because Chief looks the same age as well. I mean, Larry, of course, has the entity inside of him, so who knows? But how long has Jane been around at this point? Because later on, we found out the Doom Patrol didn't exist until the 50s. So what the hell, man? Well, that's something I need to. And we don't know if the entity is a man or a woman. I'm taking it's a man, but I don't know for sure. So there's a lot of unanswered questions on this one that are really kind of tripping me out. But based on a comic, and it's good writing too. So I mean, these little things, not that big of a deal. So yeah, she's basically having a tantrum over him hanging out with this group, the Doom Patrol, and how they're going to take up all his time. And he said he's trying to, tell her that no, it's not. They're not going to take up all his time. So Vic sees he's taking a look at the wound that was on his shoulder, and it's healed up, but we see that there's metal underneath his skin. And of course, he looks worried at this point in time because he's becoming more cyborg than he is man at this point. So Cliff comes to him and, asks him about if he can hack his daughter's profile for him. Because, which of course, Cyborg is not going to do. Vic is not going to do this. And he's also pissed at Cliff because Cliff was the one that pushed his button, which put him in safety mode. And safety mode means he can't access any of his higher functions anymore because his dad put him on lockdown. And Cliff, at this point, decides to make fun of him and says, "Oh, you can't even access your goddamn brain?" He goes, "What the hell?" And Cliff is pissed. I mean, Vic is pissed at Cliff at this point. And at this point, Jane comes in, pushes Cyborg's red glowing chest. "Hey, Siri, what's Doom Patrol?" And I love Cliff goes, "He's broken. He can't do that anymore." Which is just kind of fun watching them kind of pick on each other in little ways, like siblings in a way, which is pretty damn funny. I'm going to get to all your guys' questions, by the way, at the end. So, yeah. And Vic, of course, has never heard of Doom Patrol. And Jane says, "Well, Mr. Nobody told her to find him." And it kind of told me to find them. And they're like, "Okay, this is kind of weird." And so they go down the basement, and he's looking through microfiche. For those of you who don't know what microfiche is, it's rolls of old film that you spool into basically a light table, and you scroll through it is what you do. And yeah, and he finds out that they were a minor superhero team in the 1950s that worked for the government, essentially. And that was pretty much about it. And Rita comes in and says, "Well, what do you want about Doom Patrol?" And of course, they're like, "You know what Doom Patrol is?" Because, "Yeah, I used to date Mento back in the 50s. Steve, he was the 5th richest man in the United States." and she's going on and on about them. And Vic asks, and then they bring up Mr. Nobody. Mr. Nobody wants, of course, wanted Jane to find Doom Patrol. And they're like, wait a minute, why are we finding out something that Mr. Nobody wants? This is a man who shoved a town up a donkey's ass. Why do we want to do this? Why do his bidding? And Jane finally just kind of gets pissed off. She switches personas to Flit and grabs both Larry and Rita and takes them to supposedly Steve's house, Mento's house at this point. And Flit's back again to Jane. And she's pissed off, of course, and Flit's like, no, I'm not going to transport you guys back. We're here where we're at now, and we need to deal with this. So in the meantime, we have, while they're there doing this, I'm sorry, I actually just missed something here. So 2 women are teaching this group of children a class, supposedly, and Jane comes upon them and is asking where the hell the Doom Patrol is. And one of the women freezes Jane's mouth shut because, of course, she curses. And Jane rips the ice mask off and says, hey, kids, do you want to see what the insides of your teachers look like? And at that point, some guy comes out and calls her Jane and says, Jane, would you come with me? I can talk to you about this. And she is kind of interesting. And he asks her where Niles is. And she says, that's exactly what I'm trying to figure out, is where the hell Niles is. So Vic's dad comes by for a little visit and some repairs. He's got I kind of almost laughed because he had a bag of parts, like in a plastic bag, to fix him, and just kind of dumped it on the table. I don't know about anybody else, but that just kind of made me laugh, as well as the computer that he had. I mean, he has a laptop and everything. He's running diagnostics on him. But that whole thing about just grabbing the plastic bag and throwing it in there was pretty damn funny. It kind of reminds me of Fry's Electronics. He basically just went to Fry's Electronics, grabbed a whole bunch of parts, and then just dumped them on the table. So he wants to know what happened to Vic, and wants to know why he deployed the arm cannon, and how big the explosion was that happened. And he's like, oh no, it's not that big. It was only minor kind of thing. Mr. Nobody showed up, so that's why I needed the arm cannon. And who the hell's Mr. Nobody? And he says, well, Mr. Nobody is the one who took Niles. And Silas pretty much doesn't really care about Niles. At this point, they've had a falling out. He doesn't care. And he's pretty much just intent on fixing Vic at this point. And as he wants to put Vic to sleep in order to, fix him up. And Vic is very against this because he wants to know what's going on. He goes, why can't I stay awake and see what the hell's going on? He goes, because I need to reboot you as well. So yeah, some pretty bad stuff. In the meantime, Cliff is sitting inside watching a video. And as he's running diagnostics, Silas takes a look and goes, what the hell? There's something. What did you do here? And then we cut over to Cliff watching a video of Animal, Vegetable, Mineral Man, who we saw back in the Fuktopia episode there. His name is Steve Larson, and he's got a velociraptor for a head and also his own head. He was the subject of a botched robbery. He went in to go and rob a convenience store, and his velociraptor head attacked him in the process, which is the funniest video. I really had to go and watch that twice because it was pretty damn funny. And just as Cliff looks up and he sees both Silas and Vic looking at him. He's like, what? They're like, come here a second. And we see that Vic's finger is embedded in Cliff's arm, like in his forearm. And it's in there. And Cliff is like, hey, Astro Boy, your finger's inside of me? And he goes, don't put it that way. That just doesn't sound right. And of course, Silas takes this point to mention that Niles' work, of course, is substandard and everything because his indestructible robot man, of course, is not indestructible after all because Vic's finger penetrated him. Yeah. So Vic asks Cliff to watch out for him. His dad takes off for a second to go and do something. And Vic says to Cliff, "Hey, can you watch out when I'm under to see what my dad does?" And he goes, "I don't know. Can you help me with my problem?" And Vic is like, "No, I don't think so." And then Cliff's like, "Well, guess you're on your own then." Yeah. And some kind of fucked up stuff. Excuse me. I actually put in big letters here at the top, "Do these people age?" Because that was one of the things that was just kind of getting to me. Jane and Larry get to the June Patrol history from Josh Clay. So this guy who popped out and knows who Jane is named Josh Clay. And he's leading them around the manor, I guess you could say, and showing them everything that's going on. And Larry asks him, he goes, "Have we met before?" And Josh is like, "No." And he goes, "Were you in the military at any point in time?" And Josh kind of plays it off. So there's something else there with Josh Clay we don't know about at this point. So Josh shows Jane to her room and says, "This is your room." And she goes, "What?" And he goes, "Niles didn't send you?" And she's like, "No, we're looking for Niles. And why do I have a room here?" And this is when someone else named Arani is the one who had the fire and ice powers that we saw with Jane. She shows up when they mentioned that Mr. Nobody has taken Niles, of course. And she goes, "What? Mr. Nobody's back? That's kind of impossible." And she wants to know who he took. So even though they said Niles, she didn't remember that they took Niles. And she asks again, who did Mr. Nobody take? So there's some problems that are popping up here and there. And we see Rita. So they end up splitting up too, by the way. So Josh ends up going with Jane, and Arani takes Larry to go on a little tour. And she goes, "Yeah, have fun taking pictures," is what Jane tells him. So we see Rita flashing back to 1958 at Doom Manor. And she's talking to Chief about trying to fix whatever is wrong with her, because she needs to get it done quickly, because if she's out of the public eye for too long, everyone forgets about her. A month is years in LA time, of course. And Chief is basically telling her, it's something psychological. And he goes, I brought somebody in to help. And he brings in Mento to help her out. So Mento knows who she is. He actually relates to her via her movies and, all her movies that she's been doing. And he kind of, he acts as a gentleman and all this kind of stuff, which kind of endears her to him a bit. And she finds out that he's a mind reader, which is kind of putting it simply, if you will. And yeah, he says, like, he goes, "I'm not going to look at all your private stuff." He goes, "I'm just going to look at the surface stuff." And then we come back to the present day, and Rita's sitting outside by the fountain. And we see Steve come by looking the exact same age. Mind you, this is in the 50s, and now we're in 2019, and Steve looks exactly the same. And he knows who she is, of course, and they meet. And he asks her if she'd like to join him for a drink. And as they're walking away, the background glitches. We see this little flicker in the background. It all glitches there. So Josh is telling Jane about that he can't help her and that she has to leave, that they all have to leave at this point. And Jane asks, what was she supposed to do there, at that place? Was she supposed to be a teacher? Was she supposed to be learning something? What was going on? Was she going to be a patient or what? And he doesn't really answer her about that. He says it's a little more complicated than that. And then she goes, "Okay, then I'll leave when you tell me everything you know about Mr. Nobody," and puts her feet up on the desk. Yeah, so you can tell things are going to go to shit fairly soon. And Larry's being shown around by Arani. And Arani basically, there's a little glitch. Larry sees the glitch happening. He's like, "What the?" And she goes, "Oh, it's just one of the students having, pulling some pranks," is what she says. "We let them do that every now and then." And Larry's like, "Okay, that just seemed kind of weird." And then she also mentions, "Oh yeah, and by the way, I'm married to Niles." And he's like, "What?" I actually said, "What the fuck?" I had Cliff's reaction on that one. I think that's what they were doing this episode, is they wanted the audience to say, "What the fuck?" Because there was a lot of things that were revealed in this that had a lot of people saying that. So Rita and Steve have drinks down in the armory because that's the safest place to keep the hooch away from the kids. And she goes, "What is this device over here?" And he goes, "Oh, that belonged to Ultramax. He was the head of the Brotherhood of Evil." And it's like, wait a minute, wasn't Mister Nobody the head of the Brotherhood of Evil? And this is not the Marvel Brotherhood of Evil, by the way. This is the DC Brotherhood of Evil. Different things right there. So, yeah, and he said, yeah, the brain escaped the casing and it's out there someplace. So Ultramax is a character in the DC universe. I have seen he's a brain inside of that casement, usually carried by a giant gorilla, if I remember correctly. So it's been a while, but yeah, I would have liked to have seen that one there. And she goes, well, these aren't confiscated weapons. She says, these are trophies, is what she tells him, is what Rita tells Steven. You're just trying to impress me. And of course, he kind of butters her up, and she remembers back to when he was helping her in Doom Patrol, Doom Manor there. And he tells her to breathe, close her eyes and breathe. And we see her in a black space, if you will. And she goes, where am I? And he goes, don't worry about it. We're in a calm place. He goes, just breathe and tell yourself the person who is breathing is me. And so by this time, her legs are covered over because she can't control her powers at this point. So her legs are all kind of, blobby. And so she keeps breathing and says, the person who is breathing is me. The person who is breathing is me. And her legs shift back. And she is so happy when she comes, back to the real world, if you will, that she grabs a hold of Steve and kisses him. And of course, she says, oh, you're probably not allowed to do that. And he goes, no, because there's nothing, no rule against that. And he kisses her back. So in the present day, they start making out in the armory down there. And she asks Steve if he can put on his helmet again because she feels that she's losing control. And he goes, don't worry. He goes, you don't need the helmet. And they, of course, start making out a little bit more. Yeah, Rita was grateful and horny. That was true. So we see Vic's dad put him to sleep and reboot him while Cliff is in the room. And I mean, Cliff is just being an asshole to Vic as usual. Tell him night night kind of thing as Vic kind of convulses and then goes to sleep. And we end up having Silas, says, hey, let me take a look at you. He goes and see what work, Niles has done. And basically, Niles had consulted Silas for Cliff's design, but pretty much threw everything out that he said. And Cliff was like, wait a minute, so you could have made me like him? He goes, probably better. Which is kind of a slam on his son. I was like, wow, you're kind of an asshole, man. And so then he says, he basically says all your parts are obsolete. You'd have to go back in time to find any parts for you at this point. And he also pulls the finger out of Cliff's arm with the fingertip, which is just nasty at that point. And so he asks what happened, how the explosion happened. And Cliff, in his uncharacteristic way, tells the unvarnished version of everything that happened, the explosion. And we see Silas getting more and more concerned and going, what the hell? And Cliff's like, no, wait. He actually did a great job. I mean, Vic showed a lot of himself yesterday about what happened here. He is a hero, and basically Silas gets pissed off and says, nope, he's coming home with me. Basically all that kind of stuff. And Cliff gets in his face and tells him, you're a shitty parent. You need to actually give him a little bit of space, let him do what he wants to. And then Silas rips into Cliff and goes, what the fuck do you know about parenting? He goes, have you ever lost a son? Or have you lost a child? Which, of course, flips Cliff's switch at that point. And he gets up and he goes, you arrogant knuckle fuck. Or you arrogant fuck knuckle is what he says. I actually had to write it down because, he says, you're not the only one who's in this kind of situation. And basically he leaves. So, yeah, pretty fucked up. And he basically tells Silas, if you give him a chance, he could actually grow into a really, good hero, a nice kid, all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, exactly. Excuse me. I'm going to keep hitting this damn thing until I get it out of my way tomorrow. I'm very sorry about all the bouncing screen and all that kind of stuff, but at least you can hear me, right? I know I can actually hear myself when I did that. It got really loud because I have my earphones in. So yeah, so we have Arani telling Larry she's telling Larry about the wedding, and Larry says he's known Niles for over 6 decades now, and Niles has never mentioned being married at all. And she says, well, he has his secrets. She goes, I was married to him for over a year before he told me about his daughter. And yeah, and same thing. What the fuck? Larry does the same thing. He's like, what the wait, he has a daughter? Kind of thing. Um, so yeah, it's just been some really fucked up stuff. And so Larry, Rita, and Jane, and they all get the story of how Doom Patrol fought Mr. Nobody, and it was the last fight that Mr. Nobody supposedly had, and it was all taking place on Memorial Day weekend in the park. And excuse me, my next page, I forgot about this. I had 3 pages worth of notes. I could have gone 4 pages worth of notes because there was just so much exposition on this. Excuse me. So a hot air balloon in the shape of a buttocks comes flying by, and instead of a carriage underneath it or basket, it's carrying a large jukebox that's playing Perry Como's Hot Diggity over and over again. And anyone within range of it within 20 minutes goes insane. So the cops show up, and they're trying to hit it with their batons, and of course it has a transformer ray that changes the police into pinatas, which the crazed crowd attacks. They rip open the pinatas and eat the candy that's inside. Some pretty fucked up shit right there. So then at this point, the jukebox splits open when the Doom Patrol gets there. We see them show up, and the jukebox splits open, and Mr. Nobody and the Vinyl Warriors. So the Vinyl Warriors are bodies made out of long play records come out to attack at this point. Excuse me. Mento's version is that he stopped Mr. Nobody, and of course that ended it right there. Arani's version is that if it wasn't without Niles, Niles was the one that defeated Mr. Nobody and saved them all. And Larry goes, wait a minute. How can a guy with no powers in a wheelchair stop Mr. Nobody? Because otherwise he would have done it, at this point in time. And she goes, well, why don't you ask him yourself? And Niles shows up, wheeling into the place, and hi, how you doing, honey? All this kind of stuff, and what's for dinner? And Larry's like, wait a minute, where the hell have you been? And that's when we see Niles kind of dodging the question. So Larry runs his hand through Niles, and of course he's like a hologram. He's not there. Yeah. So at this point, Rita tells Steve that Mr. Nobody is back, and obviously they didn't defeat him. And he gets mad at her, and he goes, why couldn't you let me have this? Why couldn't you let me have this? And then she sees a woman named Mary Beth. And I had to rewind this a couple times. I got Meredith, and then I finally got Mary Beth, because I don't know why, but the actress didn't enunciate a couple different words. There was a couple words for some reason that I couldn't get out of her. I actually had to put on subtitles for one of them because, yeah, sorry, but oof, it was just kind of one of my little pet peeves when people don't enunciate words like that. So it was Mary Beth, who is dressed up in the 50s, says that, she didn't say no, is what she said. I didn't say no. And she slits her arms open with this giant straight razor. And of course, Rita is screaming. And we see an old Mento. We see Mento as an old man in a wheelchair with the helmet on, and the helmet, of course, is spinning. So we know now that he's fucking with everybody at this point. And he's using this whole, basically the whole thing is an illusion. That's why everything was kind of glitching as it was. Josh, in the meantime, he hears thunk 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 on the doors. He's like, what the hell? And he opens it up and he sees all these knives and sharp objects basically in the door. And he says, oh crap, Rhea is having problems. He goes, stay in here, I'll take care of it. Mento might have slipped again, is what he says. Mento is starting to lose it, and Rhea has lost control of her powers. So we see Josh is in the hallway, and he says, oh, and she goes, well, what about the children, is what Jane asked him. He goes, I never wear any children. And he goes out into the hallway. He leaves her with that little bit of information. And when he goes out there, he sees Niles out in the hallway, and he goes, great, Niles, you're here. You can help me with Mento. He is, having a break again. And then he realizes that's not Niles. It's actually Mento pretending to be Niles at this point. And he tells him that he needs him to go back to where his talents truly lie, is what Niles tells Josh. And Josh is like, no, I can't. So I believe that Larry's original recognizing of Josh was working for the military. And we'll get to that a little bit as well. So Josh, I think, did work for the military in a certain capacity. So we end up finding out also that, I'll get to that point too. So there's a lot of stuff, like I said, to unpack. There's just so much stuff. So Jane is inside the room still, and she sees a little puzzle piece fall. And she looks at it and she freaks out. And they're falling from the cabinet, and more start falling out. And we hear somebody saying, sweet, sweet baby, don't keep me waiting. And I'm kind of figuring it might be her father at this point. Excuse me. So Larry sees Arani as an old woman, and she has fire and ice in one in each hand. And she attacks him and just starts throwing fire and ice balls at him. And he takes off down the hallway. And Jane is outrunning a wave of puzzle pieces down the hallway until she gets to a room, and then it covers her over to like her waist. And we see a hand pop up out of the puzzles and come towards her again, saying, sweet baby, don't keep me waiting. And of course she screams. Mento tells Rita that the death of Mary Beth is the root of all of her psychoses, basically. And that's where her problems lie. And that's pretty much what he's using to fuck with her. He's known it all this time, and just decided to use it now to do this and use it against her. So the entity at this point ends up leaving Larry and going down and taking the helmet off of Mento, and ends the entire thing at that point. So the entity basically saves all their ass. Yeah, the puzzles do represent her personality. Yes, we know this, but I have a feeling that the person who is talking is the reason for that happening, and that is her father. So we had gotten already hints of this already in earlier episodes. So Josh ends up telling Rita and Jane and Larry that how Niles created the Doom Patrol for the government. And he was the one that selected their missions for them. And they're basically Mr. Nobody got wind of them from all the missions that they were doing and decided to fuck with them. He got into their minds and broke them, and then have them attack each other, essentially. That sounded a little familiar, kind of like what was happening in the first and second episode there, or the second and third episodes. Yeah. So, yeah, that's what's going on there. And so this is kind of a group home for them. And Josh is basically their physician, and he has superpowers as well. He doesn't use them all that often, but he says he's there to help them out. And that they're essentially broken people is what they are. And they're just there to be taken care of and not hurt anybody else, which is kind of messed up. And so Josh asked them to leave. And they said, well, wait a minute, what happened to Arani is what Rita asks. And so he goes and shows them, and she's sitting there on the bed. First they show Rhea. Rhea is laying on the bed, and floating above her are all these sharp instruments, which are just floating around in a circle. He goes, that's how they spend their day. And then he shows Arani, and Arani's in a cube of ice that's flaming as well. And she's just basically huddled inside of it, crying and just broken. And same thing with Mento. Mento, he goes, I basically have to keep him drugged. Otherwise, he has psychotic episodes, and takes the others down with him. And Rita says she wants to help. So we don't know exactly what Rita is going to help him with, but it's kind of weird here. So we see Dr. Stone, Silas back there rebooting Vic, and he reactivates him and says, "Hey, I've reactivated your privacy mode as well." He goes, "And no more spying on you." He goes, "You're ready to be a man, your own man. You've shown me that." He goes, "And when you're ready to come home, you come home." He goes, "Do what you need to do." So before Silas leaves, Vic gives him a hug, which kind of surprises Silas a bit. And as Silas walks away, we see that Vic has pocketed a USB, a thumb drive. And so he obviously still does not trust his dad at all, which is probably a good thing. So we see Rita flashback to her and Mento in bed, and Mento getting dressed, and he is pissed at her, basically saying that about what she did to the girl Mary Beth. And he goes, "How could you?" He goes, I thought I knew you, but no." He goes, you're evil," kind of thing, "and you're broken." And she's crying as he walks out the door. And Rita is there with him, and she's got his helmet in her hands, and she's telling him that she realizes now that she keeps dwelling on certain things in the past, things that she has no control, she can't help anymore. She shouldn't be dwelling on these things, and that is what he was trying to tell her, and that was what he was trying to help her with, on past misdeeds. And she says she wants to get over that so that Mr. Nobody won't have that power, won't hold that power over her. And she gives him back his helmet, and everything goes back to looking nice the way it was. Yeah. So Jane asks Josh how often Niles visits them, and he says not that often, which is really kind of messed up. And he tells her that maybe Mr. Nobody sent her out there to find the Doom Patrol, basically as a warning to tell them, if you fuck with me, this is what I'm going to do to you. I'm going to break you, and I'm going to leave you in a home like this. Which, again, I'm just like, God damn, man. How evil can you get, as a villain? He fucked over one group completely, and then, brought them in again. Sorry, you know what? That was the other thing I forgot to mention, too, is that Larry's flashback of all the shit that was going down was of a guy recruiting him, trying to recruit him for a government black ops team. And the guy's fingers actually had turned into needles. So they were basically experimenting on him the entire time. Him and his friend, as they put it, which is the entity that's inside of him. So I have a fairly good idea that Josh used to work for that group that was trying to, that either recruited or was trying to recruit Larry and the entity. So, we have, that's the lesson that basically Mr. Nobody was trying to teach them. It was, don't fuck with me, or I will break you and leave you in a dilapidated home to basically live in your own worst nightmares forever, which is really bad. So we see Vic creates a profile for Cliff to view his daughter on Facehole. And he goes, "Yeah, she's accepted your friend request, although she doesn't know it." He goes, "Congratulations, you're catfishing your daughter." And he walks away kind of disgusted with what he's done. And Cliff, of course, is going through her profile. So the Doom Patrol, we see the Doom Patrol in the trophy room getting ready to take a portrait picture. They're all dressed up in their uniforms. And then we see the reality of it, where they're actually sitting there in the trophy room, which is dimly lit with the light kind of flickering. And Josh giving, he's giving Mento his meds, with who he takes them and all this kind of stuff and swallows them. And they're basically just sitting there in the dark, kind of in a dilapidated house, which is really fucked up. It's kind of a downer. So we see Vic looking at the USB that he took from his dad. He actually plugs it into the computer. Larry, in the meantime, goes into his room, and we see him open up a drawer and take out a patch belonging to a some weird. It honestly it looked like a BPRD, Bureau of Paranormal Research and Development from Hellboy. It looked like that kind of patch, but I know it's actually from the comics itself, from Doom Patrol comics, and we see the light, the entity, kind of light up in his chest, and he goes, "Yeah," I don't remember it either, kind of thing. So obviously something really bad happened, and we haven't gotten the full story from Larry as of yet, which is going to be interesting. And then we have Rita. She's taking down all her pictures of herself as a film actress off the mirror. She's, I think, coming to terms with who she is at this point. So I don't know, man. I'll get to that in a little bit here, Joker. So Jane ends up seeing the padlock on her door, outside her door, for the first time, and realizing what her role in all of this is, and how Chief has been treating her, kind of thing. So she has some questions about it. In the meantime, Cliff, who's been going through his daughter's face hole profile, sees a album named Me and Dad. And Dad is someone named Bump, who obviously Cliff knows. And he goes, "Bump, Bump, what the fuck? Bump, Bump." And he finally smashes the computer because he's very pissed at this point. And that's where we leave off. Damn, that's all I can say. It was a lot to unpack. Joker the Third says, "Mr. Nobody, kind of like the wonderful Mr. Purple." No, Mr. Purple didn't have a sense of right and wrong. Honestly, Mr. Nobody knows exactly what right and wrong is, and he doesn't care. So I honestly want to say Mr. Nobody's a little more terrifying than Mr. Purple, the Purple Man. So yeah. For me, he's a lot more terrifying, especially since he can also rend space and time and, turn cops into fucking pinatas that get ripped apart by crowds to eat their innards, their candy innards. Damn, man, that's all I can say. So Movie for Nobody says they trust her a little more now, left her room unlocked, or does Jane see her past because both rooms have a lot of locks on them? Maybe that Niles didn't trust her as much as she thought. That's what I was thinking, that she finally sees that she's dangerous and needs to be locked up from time to time, much like the Doom Patrol, and that she's damaged goods, and kind of needs to, that's something that she needs to work through as well, and something that she has been trying to work through but hasn't really been focusing on it, I guess you could say. And I guess this is what's kind of going to bring her through this as well. Dennis mentioned the suits from the old comics last week. Cool. Yeah, the suits are from the 50s, the old Doom Patrol comics, which were really kind of cool. Excuse me. Yeah, this is really the opposite of the Xavier Academy. This is way different. Movie for Nobody says, was there any discernible image on the puzzle piece or personalities? I think there was. I think it was her paintings. It was what Jane had been painting, what we saw early on. And because we saw all the different paintings that she was doing, and I believe that's what those puzzle pieces were the different pieces of her personalities. Let's see what else here. Jody says, I was 18 when it came out. Oh, okay. They're talking about something else here. And the Mummy. And they're talking about, yeah, okay. God. All right, let's see what else we had. Somebody had trouble watching Doom Patrol on her tablet. Was that Viking bitch that had problems doing that? Sorry, I really wasn't reading through that because there was so much that I needed to get through that I kind of ignored you guys in the chat for a little while. I apologize right now, but yeah, it was the only way I could get through it. Man. Let's see what else here. Okay, you guys are talking about all kinds of other things other than Doom Patrol early on. There we go. Let me see here. Jody says, so many interesting revelations on this episode, Dennis. Do you think we'll get a satisfying payoff for the stuff they're hinting at? I kind of hope we do. I believe we will. I think by at least the second season. And honestly, the show is going to get a second season. I mean, this show has knocked it out of the park. This is the benchmark right now that DC Universe has set for its own episodes. They need to fire Akiva Goldsman from Titans and bring in, I would bring in Jeremy Carver and throw him on Titans now at this point as well, just to clean up that mess. Because I'm sorry, that was a mess. You don't start off a streaming service with that. That was the reason why I did not buy the streaming service, was because Titans was so piss poor bad. And apologies to those of you who loved it, but I couldn't stand it. Yeah, it was bad. Movie Fanobi says, I like that Mento was almost like Professor Xavier in Logan. So powerful even at his age, but can lose control. But yeah, but he needed that helmet in order to amplify his thoughts. I mean, he was powerless without, I mean, not powerless, but he still had the power, but he needed the helmet in order to amplify it to affect other people. So I loved how they just kind of simply ended it. The entity just came over and just takes it off of his head and ends everything. I was like, wow, okay, just, you know, when everyone really needed it, the entity stepped up and helped him, you know, helped him out. I was like, shit, okay, that's good. So where else are we here? Jody says, kind of like having a reality jump from the Infinity Gauntlet, Mr. Nobody's reality warping ability. Yeah, we still haven't gotten into Mr. Nobody's powers, but what he can do. And I'm hoping we get into that before, I mean, because we're on episode 6 now. We have 13 episodes. Is that correct? Or is it 15? I think it's 15 episodes. Yeah, we're getting 15 episodes. That's right. So, wow, we got 9 more episodes to go, which is really kind of cool. They're going to flesh out a little bit more stuff. Okay, that's what they were talking about, because originally they had 13 episodes. Then they said they were packing on 3 more to flesh things out a bit more. So I guess that's what they're talking about. Yeah, I'm very interested to see where they're going to go with this. Because, damn, every episode has enough exposition for a 3-hour-long movie, quite honestly. It's that good. Joker says, I can't wait until DCU gets an Xbox One app. Doesn't it? I thought they already had one. I mean, they have one for the PS4. I know that. So, I mean, I watch it through Amazon Fire. I have Amazon Fire TV, so that's why I'm watching it. I have it on there, and I also have it on my Android box as well. Yeah. And that reminds me, I need to go and change cable, because DirecTV now is raising prices. Yeah. Yeah, who does not love Cliff, man? I mean, Cliff, even the ones where like this, where we're not seeing a lot of Cliff, we still get enough of Cliff to, I mean, it's just the little bits he pushes through. I love Jane. I mean, Jane is awesome. I'm trying to think who my favorite character is at the moment, and I'm going to say it's Jane at this point. Yeah, I mean, Larry is interesting. I need to know more about Larry, about what his powers, the entity, and all that kind of stuff. That would be interesting as well. But yeah, it's got to be Jane at this point. So there we go. What else do we have? No, she's not moving Fanobi. Pepper is not getting those. She's asleep on the couch. She got one, and that was all she needs. Brian Fisher says, I love DC streaming, being able to watch all the old cartoons and movies. Yeah, tell me about it. I just watched Shazam, the old Shazam from the 70s. My God, is it horrible? I mean, it is, talk about, I remember watching them on Saturday mornings because they came on at like 11 p.m. or 11 a.m., something like that, right after like right after all the cartoons and stuff like that. Even the cartoons you really didn't want to watch, it was right after that. That's when they did the live action stuff, and God, they were bad. I mean, just horribly, horribly bad, but funny at the same time. And now I'm watching Legion of Superheroes, which I forgot about that was on. And it's Superboy and Legion of Superheroes. It's an animated show that was on DC Universe, and that's I forgot how good that was. It was actually really good, and it got canceled after 2 seasons because no one was watching it. I think because they were bouncing it around. That was at the time DC was having problems getting animated titles on TV. Marvel was able to get them on TV. DC wasn't, and now it's switched again. So who knows? Brian Fisher says, has there been any news about Swamp Thing? They're filming it right now. They keep adding people, which is kind of funny. They keep adding people left and right to that thing. So, and James Wan is the showrunner on it, and he's directing the first episode, and I think wrote the first episode. So yeah, it's going along. Jody says, at Brian Fisher, yeah, and that's not kind of the access to their comics. Yeah, that's right. So DC Universe, I mean, you get the access to their comics. Oh, I'll save it for tomorrow. I'll save it for Saturday morning blast off. I don't want to ruin it now. So there's some DC Universe news. So that's all I'm gonna say. That's right. I'm gonna tease you for tomorrow. Say, hey, even supervillains can love animals, right? That's right, Morks. Morks says Mr. Nobody is a supervillain, allegedly, but he does give his dog treats. Yeah. Excuse me. Joe Greer says Hulu Live and plenty of other cheaper alternatives. Yeah, I'm not doing Hulu Live. I actually can run it through my internet provider and still get it for cheap, and get like 140 channels and HBO included. So yeah, I did all the math on it already, and I looked around. I did all my math, all my research. So Jody says, seriously, they're raising prices. Yeah, Jody, they just raised prices back in November by $10 because I called them about it, and they're going to raise it again, $10, even though they promised they weren't going to do it. So it's now going to be, and they're changing their lineups and all that kind of stuff too. Viacom is dropping them, if I remember correctly. So if you aren't already a member of DirecTV Now, any Viacom channels you won't get if you subscribe to them on their new service. Sorry. But the old service will still keep it. It's really all kinds of weird. So is it Larry? Why do I keep calling him Charlie? I don't know why you call him Charlie. It's Larry. That's right. Yeah, the mighty ISIS. God. You know what? I haven't bit that bullet yet. I remember watching ISIS too, back when I was a kid. And I remember I wasn't even impressed with them back then. What I really want them to release, there was a really bad, it was like a Legion of Superheroes. So it was a Super Friends, essentially, like live action version of Super Friends with the villains included. And it was kind of like a roast almost in a way. It was a 1 hour, I think it's on YouTube, as a matter of fact. It was a 1 hour thing where Adam West was in it, Burt Ward was in it. There's a couple other people that had played superheroes in live action for DC in there as well. The guy who played the Riddler on Batman, he's actually in there as the Riddler, Frank Gorshin. I think Cesar Romero did the Joker in that one. I mean, there was all kinds of stuff in there, man. It was funny. They had Solomon Grundy, The Flash. I mean, and it was just a weird ass show. It's really bad. It's really horribly bad. It's very 70s, and it's played for comedy. So yeah, if you find it on YouTube, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I mentioned it to you. Jody, will they add Matt Ryan's Constantine and Swamp Thing? Hopefully. They right now are in talks. They, being WB, are in talks about bringing Constantine back to TV, which more than likely means DC Universe with Matt Ryan as Constantine. So there you go. That's what it is. See you, Brian Fisher. Didn't see that you were taken off there. I had scrolled up a bit. Joe Greer the Third says they don't say her name on CW Legends of Tomorrow. Yeah, they don't call her Isis on there. They really don't. They say that she has the powers of Isis, which is really kind of fucked up. I mean, come on. Really. Sorry, it's Dracula Jr., Steve. Jody says, "Oh, come on, Dennis. You know you loved them when they were airing." Yeah, they did have a certain charm about them. I mean, that was the only shit that we had as kids back then on TV. That was live action superheroes. 70s Superman, Spider Man, same thing, where he shot ropes from his arms. You know, from the that big ass. I don't know what the hell it was on his wrist that he had that big silver wrist thing that he was shooting ropes out of. Yeah, I mean, I love that stuff too. But looking back on it now, you know, I can't watch them. They're really bad. But that's what we had when we grew up, and you know, I loved them then. But yeah, I can't watch them now. So with that said, if you like what you've seen here, hit the subscribe button. Also hit the like button. If you didn't like what you said, blah, 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 blah. If you don't like that kind of stuff or me screwing up or coughing into the microphone, hit the dislike button. Tell me down below why you didn't like it. Give me a little constructive criticism so I can find out how to better the channel. If you want to hear when I'm going to be on live again, hit the little bell. If you've already hit the bell, don't hit it again. It deactivates it. So hit it once and leave it. You get a 50-50 chance of YouTube actually telling you when I'm going to be on live again by hitting that bell. Like Morks, I bet you Morks didn't get that that notification until well into this broadcast. So there we go. If you're still on the fence about joining up, you're going to see there's going to be videos up here. There's going to be one video. I should say that again. What it's going to do is the algorithm is going to, of everything that you've watched, is going to pluck a video from my library and throw it up there just for you to watch. If you like what you see, hit the subscribe button. There's going to be a subscribe button over here too at the end. You can find a schedule of all my content on suspendedfanimation.com. It's also up on Facebook. You can also follow me on Twitter under Suspended Fanimation and also on Instagram as well. So I'm all over the place there. And tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. or 10:30 a.m., I believe I have 10:30 a.m. up there, is going to be Saturday Morning Blast Off. So what is Saturday Morning Blast Off? That is a genre news of the week. Genre being, you know, superheroes, fantasy, horror, you name it, anything that doesn't deal with drama and all that kind of stuff. Although sometimes we throw some drama in every now and then too, because why not? That's what life is all about. I'm going to talk about all that news that's going on and anything else you guys want to talk about in the genreverse. So with that said, there's a documentary about the show on YouTube. Oh, really? Wow. That's interesting. SBO is the best. SBO. Sorry, I'm blanking on the acronym all of a sudden. So Movinobi says, prime the solid rocket booster fuel. Tomorrow we all get to release. Bring your towel. Always know where your towel is. Exactly. Saturday Morning Blast Off. Thank you. Sorry, Marks. It's been a long week. That's all I can say. And yeah, it's not YouTube, it's SBO. Oh, man. Yeah, you know what? When I came up with that name, I was not, you know, the acronyms were not there in my head. It just was a name that I came up with that sounded very Saturday morning cartoonish for me. So Jody says, Dennis, you have to go already. Can't you hang out a bit more? I want to keep these kind of short, Jody. I don't want them to run out long. Tomorrow will be the time when we can actually talk out a lot longer. So I just want to keep it this kind of set up to the Doom Patrol broadcast. But tomorrow morning, we'll definitely talk. So with that said, take a look at the videos up here. Hit the subscribe button. Until tomorrow morning, I will let you guys go. Don't let the door hit your ass on the way out. Otherwise, Mr. Nobody may send you to find the Doom Patrol to tell you how fucked you are. Good night, everybody.